Welcome to Scorched Earth and a general reading for the sign of Aries, Sun, Moon or Ascendant for the month of June. I hope you are well. I'm using the Night Sun Tarot for you today. Before we begin, if the reading resonates with you and you'd like to go a little bit deeper, there is an extended that you can access at the end. That's the first link in the description box. Second link in the description box is to my private community, the Order of the Phoenix, over on Circle. You can get access to all of the extended content for no extra cost over there and get to hang out with an incredible group of people. There's so much knowledge in there, I can't even. So if that's something that you're interested in, you know what to do. Right, Aries, let's have a look and see what's going on with you. Could I have 3 cards for Aries, please? Whoa, okay, let's flip this around. We have the Hermit and we have the Page of Pentacles in your recent past. Current energy for Aries. Beautiful. We have the 8 of Wands. And what's coming towards Aries for June, please? We have Judgment and the 3 of Swords. With the 4 of Wands, let's put these where you can see them, at the bottom of the deck. Right. Don't worry about that 3 of Swords, because I think that actually is really quite positive. Let's get some clarifiers out. Give those a little waft. And tell me about the Hermit and the Page of Pentacles, please. We have the King of Cups, makes sense. We have the Chariot, makes even more sense. And we have the Ace of Pentacles, beautiful, spot on. Tell me about this 8 of Wands. We have the Queen of Swords. Ooh, we have 2 Knight of Wands and the 4 of Pentacles. So pop those down there like that. And then tell me about Judgment and the 3 of Swords. Queen of Wands in reverse. High Priestess. Ooh. And the Hermit. Yeah. 10 of Wands at the bottom of the deck. Followed by the Sun. I don't know why I felt the need to go and have a look underneath there, but there it is. I mean, 10 of Wands to the Sun. Anyway. Excuse me, I'm feeling a bit gravelly this morning for some reason. Right. Let's get a little stick out. So, let me put these where you can see them more readily. I really, really like the Hermit and the Page of Pentacles together for you in your recent past. Now, I should explain, when I say recent past, it really could be this morning. It could be when you got out of bed, this is what was going on in your head. Or it could be, 6 weeks hence from here, backwards. It'll be different for each of you, and you really should take it as it resonates to you. Hopefully you'll find a point of resonance with the reading somewhere. But this really does feel to me like a contemplation of how you move forwards. Now, we've talked at length in previous readings about how the last year everything just sort of fell off a cliff for you. I think I've used the phrase a protracted tower moment to describe what has occurred for you. It's been extremely challenging. And I think it's only really on reflection that you can see how dark it has been. We have also talked about, this action for action's sake, and the need to fight, and how terribly fucking exhausting that has proven to be for you. I mean, for some of you, it actually might have been going on for longer than a year. We might even be stretching as far as 18 months. And it's been difficult to see the wood for the trees, in so much as what has happened, as difficult as it sounds, has not happened to you. It has happened for you. And in the best tradition of these kind of periods of intense spiritual growth, it's uncomfortable, because what's trying to be shaken free for you is an attachment to an old way of doing things, right? Any kind of forced evolution requires, by necessity, a need to allow your identity to evolve, to allow you to evolve into something much more free and much more powerful. And that often feels incredibly counterintuitive with the things that you are being required to deal with. You know, the things that exit your life, the things that you are required to let go of. And there's been a lot, just in 2023, there's been a lot of tying up loose ends, I guess. Achieving that level of deep insight that is required for this kind of, spiritual evolution. And realizing quite how much of the way that you are and the way that you fight and the way that you have struggled has been something that's been rooted in your perception rather than necessarily the reality of the situation. That's really the best way to put it. But what we've been seeing in the last month or so is a very welcome turn towards the future, because you cannot create this much space in your life. And, some of that might be physical space. There may well be people that are no longer in your life that were in your life before, with a corresponding amount of drama and emotional trauma. Actually, I don't think it's an overstatement to use the word trauma associated with those relationships. It could be jobs, it could be houses, it could be all sorts of things. You can't create the amount of space that you have. And more specifically, I would say it's now emotional, because you've been processing an awful lot of this stuff without the universe allowing something to rush in to replace it. Now, I don't think at this point that you necessarily have all of those bright new beginnings happening at you. There's somewhat of a liminal space that you are occupying at the moment. However, what I'm really liking, like I said, is this Hermit and this Page of Pentacles, because the Hermit is all about the internal journey. Excuse me. It's Virgo energy, so it's it's mutable earth, and you are cardinal fire, right? You're always pointing the way, always initiating, starting stuff. But this mutable earth energy is kind of like, what resources do I have? Right? In the first instance, what resources do I have? We've got double pentacles here. And for me, the pentacles are energetic currency. They are not purely talking about your material resources. They're also talking about your energetic resources, your emotional resources, maybe it's even your spiritual resources. And this mutable earth is saying, right, resources exist, and I may actually have more resources than I thought that I did. Maybe I have fewer than I thought that I did. But now's the time to work out what is the best way to start deploying these resources. How can I start investing in them? And we see that both in the Ace of Pentacles and the Page of Pentacles there. But the Hermit is that state of contemplation. Now, you cannot have the amount of change and upheaval that you have had without possibly, your very identity getting a little bit fuzzy around the edges, and like, who the fuck am I, and what the fuck do I stand for, and what is the point of me, possibly, if you really go that deep, like, why am I here? What am I here to do? And I think what's going on here is a sifting through what remains in the aftermath of the protracted Tower moment that you've had, in an attempt to look for something that is much more meaningful than what you have had before. Now, like I said, you might have lost relationships, you might have lost jobs, you might have even lost your home. These cornerstones of your existence, by which you have, in a state of kind of like, I don't know, reflected interpretation, you have kind of defined yourself by, aren't there anymore. And there's something much more authentic that's starting to come through now. When you just think about the need to fight everything, right? In the first instance, it's recognizing everything as being something that requires some sort of big reactive force. It's always outside, it's always inside out, right? It's a very externalizing kind of energy, whereby what I think is being replaced here is much more reflective, much more flexible, perhaps, which is interesting, certainly when it comes to the way that you perceive yourself. And something, dare I say it, much more fucking peaceful. Because not everything requires a reaction. We've already worked this one out, right? It's taken some time, but we've got there. Not everything requires your focus on it, and it doesn't need to be fought against. And the important thing that I feel has happened here for you is that recognition that sometimes it's about it outwards in. Now, whether that's been about, sitting with the way that other people have been with you and going, actually, I don't feel like I need to respond to that. Or, I've lost a job, but actually, I'm putting myself in a position whereby perhaps I can start something new. I can do a training course for a different kind of, maybe I'm just changing career altogether. And I'm investing in something that is much more suited to me than what I was doing a year ago. But it's sitting with the idea that not everything is a threat. And this has only been able to come about by the introduction of this flexibility of self that wasn't there before, right? It was very rigid, very guarded, big fortifications, huge. I went to, where did I go? The Saravets in Bulgaria. It's this huge fort. It's fucking incredible, and it's been there for like centuries. And it's built up on a hillside, and then right at the top there's a patriarchal cathedral of the Ascension of the Father or something. It's called something like that. It's like a huge long name. And all around these forts, this fort, much to my children's absolute delight, were huge fucking crossbows. Massive, like on wheels kind of things. The sort of thing that would have taken like 6 men to pull it back. And these arrows would have gone like fucking 2 miles easily. It's straight through 15 people. That to me is how your identity has felt, right? Extremely rigid, unassailable, and, in a constant state of defense, actually. Because of the perceived threat that exists outside of you all of the time, right? And you're looking out and going like, holy fuck, everything is dangerous as shit, and it requires a forceful response, because otherwise people might think that they can, take advantage of me, and that'd be fucking terrible. But I feel the nature of your structure is changing. Now, the crossbows still exist. Like, I would never seek to take your fire away from you. But the fire that has been expressed in defense now seems to be being used for creativity instead. Because you're thinking and you're feeling, and maybe you're even doing in a way that you haven't done before. It's like, if I wasn't expending all of my energy fighting everybody in the fucking world, what could I learn? What is the potential for who I could be if I just put the fortifications to one side? Now, like I said, in the first instance, what that requires from you, and we see it here in the Queen of Swords, is an ability to be able to discern the difference between something that is a threat and something that is pushing you towards your higher good. When I think about criticism, right? I found it so difficult to deal with criticism when I was a kid. Like, everything that was less than perfect that I did, that somebody commented on, was cut my very soul in two. That's how it felt. And I could not discern the difference between constructive criticism and an all-out frontal assault. And I would respond accordingly. I'd be fucking devastated, And as I got older, that incurred a kind of a volatile response from me, actually, as we get older and our capacity for destruction increases, and our capacity for I don't know, that kind of malleable stage that we're at when we're a kid, where somebody could have taught us that constructive criticism is actually really, really useful and it helps us get better, sort of goes. And instead, we become very reactionary to it. And it's like, don't fucking criticise anything that I do, because you're literally criticising me right at the core. That's going with you altogether. And this ability to discern what is a threat and what is actually potentially turning up for your highest good is it's making a big impact in who you are. We've got the King of Cups there, which is Scorpio energy, and maybe it's even, speaking on a broader, from a broader perspective, it's Plutonian energy, possibly. But it talks about emotional maturation. The King of Cups he doesn't wear his emotions on his sleeve. He doesn't go around sobbing at everything. What it represents is somebody who is in control of their emotions rather than someone who is controlled by their emotions. And it's a very different thing, because you are not your emotions. And I think that somewhere along the line, emotions got confused with reactions and responses. And the idea of peace is something that left for a time, but has returned. And it's here with the Chariot. Now, in just the same way as I see with the Page of Pentacles, the Chariot is about the direction forward. It's about the direction of travel. It does also speak about victory and success and those cool things. It talks about determination, but at its core, it talks about the self. It talks about things coming into alignment with the self. I've talked before about these two sphinxes here, and the fact that they represent the polarities of life itself, of us as individuals, and how necessary those polarities are. More so, how necessary it is to balance those polarities. So you have the light and the I was going to say the light and the day, which doesn't make any sense at all. Like the light and the shadow, the light and the dark, the good and the bad. Everything that sits at either end of the spectrum. And how we come to occupy a place in the centre where we can control these, but we don't ignore one of the sphinxes. We don't pretend that the sphinx doesn't exist. Particularly if that sphinx is representing our shadow. So what we've got here is a kind of acceptance that there are ways that you have done things that maybe haven't been right. But we're extending compassion and forgiveness to ourselves, a sense of peace to the mistakes that we've made. Maybe we're recognising that some people, nowhere is it written in stone that some people have to remain with us forever. We've talked about abandonment issues, which I had a lot of Aries kind of giving me the side eye on that one, frankly, giving me the side eye for months. But increasingly, Aries are coming up and going, holy fucking shit. Like, I did not recognise that for what it was, but now I do. It's unlocked this whole area that is ripe for healing within me, and I'm willing to go there. I'm willing to do it. It feels like it's possible for the first time, and it's simply because I just did not recognise what this whole kind of little, solid stone, impenetrable kind of feelings that I had was coming from. The Chariot is a card of self-control. In fact, it's a card of anything that you can tack the prefix self onto. So self-knowledge, self-worth, self-discipline, self-motivation. The things that, in some ways, Aries has already been known for throughout your life. But we're changing the way that you're approaching this. It's coming from a much cleaner place. It's coming from a much healthier place. It's coming from a less reactionary place, which is amazing. And the Ace of Pentacles is the end result of creating that space within yourself. So the Ace of Pentacles is a new point of attention, but it can also be new material things coming in to replace that which you need and you didn't have. So maybe it's a new job, maybe a new house, you know, maybe opportunities to improve your material environment in some way, you know, that is necessary. And I want to bring you to this Four of Wands, because the Four of Wands is the creation of a new foundation. It's taking four. Right? Four is a foundational number. You know, think about the shape of a square, right? It's got nice, predictable edges and corners everywhere, and from there you can build on top of it. And that's what's happening here. But your heart is right at the center of that, Aries. And I think that that's important, because you're starting to understand the messages from your heart. They're not confusing anymore. And where you felt angry or in some way victimized, wildly misunderstood, you know, you're starting to see that it's because that dialogue between you and your heart has been kind of like mismatched. It's been off center. And it's all coming in. So the totality of these cards here together are talking about your understanding of what it is that you can actually do moving forwards, because the blinkers are off and it seems like you're working with much more information than you had before, and that is having you think about the future. And it's not in terms of where am I next going to get ambushed by bears. It's like it like I said, it feels like you can be much more creative. Now I've kind of sloughed off this skin of reactionary behaviors, or, you know, anger or frustration or any of these things. And, you know, you still have access to those, but they're now being far better managed than they were before. The question of what you can create, dare I say even manifest for yourself, is one that is very strong in the mind right now. I'm even strong in the heart, actually. Like I said, I feel like you're in a bit of a liminal place at the moment. We haven't got the brand new shiny starts where you are completely free of what's gone before. But we're certainly past the stage where the old stuff is overwhelming you. It's kind of like, nah, I'm good. I'm tying all of this up now, and now I can start thinking about the future. And we've got the Eight of Wands here, which is a lovely card. I love this in the Night Sun Tarot. We see that there, that character, whoever she is using the wands to climb out of a very dark hole. Sorry, it's not going to focus for some reason. Fucking technology, I swear to God. Right. She's coming out of the dark hole. It's funny, I didn't even have this deck when I wrote the description that's in the description box. When I talked about sitting at the bottom of very dark holes. Like, this is a beautiful kind of depiction of the process of coming out of that again. And then I got this deck and I was like, that's exactly like what I wrote in my description box right there. We have very visually you getting out of the hole. Now, the important thing to remember here, and this is why, you know, it's one of the reasons why I say you're in a bit of a liminal space at the moment, is because she's coming out of the dark hole, for sure, and she's just broken the surface. She's about to put her foot on terra firma right there. But that is neutral, right? We've hit that point of neutrality where it's not like everything is really, really shit. We're coming back to the starting place. We're coming back to the point where everything is possible. You can go up or you can go down, and you know, which way you decide to go very much depends on you at that point, right? The absence of things being shit isn't happiness. And I've had to, I've been talking about this a lot recently. It seems to be coming up for a lot of people. You know, just removing the things that are stressing from your life isn't going to spontaneously cause you to live in a state of ecstatic bliss hereafter. Rather, it's like, well, all the shit things are gone. I can now focus. I can now attend to the business of creating ecstatic bliss for myself, actually, if you want to go down that road, right? But the Eight of Wands also talks about communication. And I wonder if your communication style has taken a bit of a nuking and is being put back together by you very consciously at the moment. You know, you may have noticed that perhaps there is an undercurrent of aggression in the way that you address people, and perhaps, you know, that's fine when you're talking to other Aries, because they understand that it's not that you're actually aggressive, it's just that you're filled with fire with everything that you do. But maybe that can be toned down a little bit. I had this, actually, I kind of had with this revelation myself last week. It was really surprising for various reasons. Anyway, but it can also talk to me about an increase in momentum. And I think like all of these things together are happening at the same time. In some ways it feels like you're very persona, right? That like the way that other people see you is now getting an overhaul. Perhaps because you've achieved a sense of awareness about how you come across to other people. I'd say one of the best things that ever happened to me, in terms of my own personal development as well as just in life generally, was having a water sign daughter. Now, up until that point, I had been married to a fire sign, a fellow Leo. I had a Leo son, and then I had Sagittarian twin daughters. There was a lot of fucking fire in this house. And then, bless her heart, I gave birth to a Pisces. Holy fucking shit. Now, that was the steepest learning curve I think I've ever experienced in my life, because everything about the way that I was too fucking aggressive for a Pisces to deal with. I mean, just too much. And by observing her and then changing the way that I dealt with her, which felt very alien, because, you know, you imagine having a house full of Leos and Sagittarians. It's just like banter non-fucking stop, and loud. It's like verbally throwing hands all the time, but it's done with love. And I would see my daughter kind of shrinking away from me and being like, oh my God. I was like, no, this is just how we communicate, because we love each other. And it was violent to her. And so I had to adjust the way that I spoke to her. So, you know, when I'm talking to my Sagittarius daughter, I will, you know, we will verbally throw hands at each other. And my son and I bounce off each other like you wouldn't believe. It's a lot of comedy in this house when we all get together. But when I'm addressing her, everything changes about the way that I conduct myself, so that she is more comfortable. And it doesn't cost me anything to do that. In fact, I gain, because it opens the lines of communication between us. And I feel like this awareness of how you come across is also acting on you here at the moment. And like I said, lots of things are converging at the same time. So it appears like you as a person is getting an entire overhaul for the better. You know, we've got this Queen of Swords here, very discerning. You know, when we're talking about communication and whatnot, she is she's a good one to have here. She's processing a lot of information for you. She's passing it. She's going, this is all actually really useful stuff, and this is stuff that we didn't notice before. But if we can make adjustments here, 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 and here, perhaps we can communicate more effectively with the people that we actually want to communicate with. You know, maybe it improves our ability to be able to hear what is actually coming towards us, rather than just getting out the crossbows, you know? And we've got it here with the Knight of Wands. I like the Knight of Wands. I know a lot of readers don't like the Knight of Wands, but I've got a lot of Saggies in my life, right? So I'm thankful to say that they're really quite evolved Saggies too. But looking back, I've actually, it's been a sign that I've spent a lot of time around. All of my major relationships. have had Sagittarius somewhere in their big 3 placement. It was somewhat of a shock to find that out. I think I worked that out about last year or something like that. Anyway, it's the spontaneity, it's the fun. I think the capacity for fun is starting to return to your life. The capacity to do things because they are enjoyable, because you're not having to dodge out of the way of these falling rocks from the tower. Be like, fuck, here's the next attack, and here's the next one. It's been fucking exhausting. Now, the idea of being present isn't quite so alarming as it was before. The thought of having fun is starting to return. But because you've taken this step up and because you've evolved, because you're thinking very specifically now about things, it's almost like getting on an exponential curve here, Aries. That's how it feels. I feel a lot of wonder when I'm looking at these cards, because it's like everything's starting to open up. The things that you didn't know, you're starting to know. The brick walls, the stone walls that you used to run up against so often are coming down, and they're being replaced with understanding. Everything's being replaced with an energy that is much lighter, and it's not because the universe is taking the boot off your throat. It's that you have taken the boot off your throat, and you're starting to see the point of anything. And I get this very, very strong sense that you are now looking for meaning in places that you did not look for it before. And that can be profound in the way that we experience life. I think it's one of the things that Jordan Peterson gets absolutely correct, but I've seen it in lots of other particularly male kind of, I don't know, life coaches, what they're called, influencers, who are trying to get people to start thinking about how to live their best life. It's a life without meaning. It's not living to our best, let's put it that way. So the search for meaning can start opening up layers that we did not perceive before. Tell me about this 4 of Pentacles. Because it feels to me like what the 4 of Pentacles is representing here is an understanding of what is actually important. There we go, touche. And we've got the Queen of Wands at the bottom of the deck. Now that's Aries for me, right there. So we've got you showing up as a force, as an identity. But here, we have the Wheel of Fortune and the Ten of Cups. The Ten of Cups does talk about collective well-being, right? It talks about those supportive emotional structures that are around us, our friends, our family, whoever. But coming out under the 4 of Pentacles, and then having the Wheel of Fortune, which for me always talks about something that we have been required to learn, right? Some sort of spiritual save point in the big game of life, right? So whatever you fuck up from this point on, and we're all going to fuck up something, you're never going to go back to the start. You're going to come back to this essential position that you find yourself in now, which is like, I get stuff. Right? I don't know it all, but I'm getting stuff that I never got before. And there's an awareness here. There's a willingness to sit with stuff. There's a willingness to create a space between action and reaction, because sometimes reaction isn't required at all. And it's saving your energy, and it's giving you the space to start, like I said, being more creative. But I love the reciprocal nature of the way that the Ten of Cups have been created here. Like, we are all connected, and you are connected to your family, and you are connected to your friends. And when considering what is important, It's looking at the ties that bind in the best possible way. There's much more of a spirit of cooperation here than there has been before. I mean, like, no man is an island and all that, Aries. And I think for the longest time, you have tried to be an island. For a lot of you, the abandonment issues caused, rather than what I always thought abandonment issues were for the longest time, right, which is all these needy people who can't cope if there isn't someone else around, and I would look at them with absolute fucking abject disgust. Fancy being that fucking needy. Very judgmental, very harsh about them. But actually they can show up in lots of other ways. They can show up in psychotic levels of independence. I would imagine much more of you resonate with that version of it than t'other. It's this willingness to be connected. Now, as an Aries, you are first in the zodiac. You are the spark of initiation. You are the first experience of fire that the zodiac has. Something quite Promethean about it, right? If you want to go down that route. But learning to control that fire, learning to understand that, well, beginning to understand that interdependence furthers everyone's ability to be able to live and enjoy life. Takes nothing away from you. Your independence as a trauma response is no longer necessary, because the trauma that you experienced, it just isn't the same anymore. It requires a different response from you now. And the response is much more about the healing than anything else. The Wheel of Fortune is a really lovely indication, Aries, that from here on out, things aren't going to necessarily be lovely and predictable like we expect from a wheel. I mean, look at it. There's fucking shit hanging off everywhere here. You're not going to put that on your fucking... on your XR2. I couldn't think of another fucking car model at that rate. You're not going to put it on there because it's not going to help you go fast. But whether we perceive it or not, these strings that attach everything, that come together to create this big wheel, rely on us working together, taking charge of our emotions and making sure that the way that we communicate and the way that we go about life generally honours and respects those people around us that we honour and respect. That we do not become so fixed in the way that we do things, so fixed in our understanding of our own identity, dare I say it, so fixed in our ego, that we don't ever allow ourselves the flexibility to change in the face of new information, in the face of new situations, in the face of new people. You know, if I had not spotted how my Pisces daughter curled up and died whenever our daughter and I were barking at each other from across the kitchen, the Sagittarius daughter, and I had continued to relate to her like a big old fucking Leo, we wouldn't have the relationship that we have now, and she wouldn't feel like she had the space to be who she was. Because all that fire energy is pretty fucking oppressive for a Pisces. I lost nothing in learning to do things differently, and I only gained, and I feel like that is where you are at too. Now, when we come to here, to June, we've got the Judgment card and the Three of Swords. Now, the Three of Swords is not a pleasant card, right? I'm not going to even pretend that it's a pleasant card. But I do feel like there's something really quite positive about the message that is coming through here. Now, the Judgment card specifically, let's talk about that for a second. Right, it's a Scorpio card for me. It represents Scorpio energy. Excuse me. But it also represents Aries a little bit too. And in both instances, what we have is something in a state of change. Now, specifically with the Judgment card, you can be talking about the resurrection of old circumstances. You can be talking about a state of rebirth, and I think the state of rebirth is a really important thing. You can be talking about decisions that need to be made. And I think if you combine all of those things together, what you've got is a conscious life change, right? A conscious change in the way that you do things that has come from you, right? You want to talk about true independence. Having the independence to change your life and allow yourself to be more interdependent is a huge step in that. And we've got that Three of Swords next to it. Like the recognition of how much pain you have been carrying around and for how long has been overwhelming for you. It's not a thing that you expected to find when you started digging around, right? But so much of these reactions have happened on the subconscious level, the conscious mind being, in charge of the fighting, really, but without necessarily knowing why fighting was necessary, but then perhaps not even giving it a thought. Just doing it, right? A lot of it's been happening on autopilot. But now you're aware, you can't help but be changed by the information. And what's coming up here for you in June is an opportunity to put yourself in a very powerful position of deciding whether or not you are going to allow yourself in future to take the path of pain or the path of something else. Right. That Queen of Wands in reverse there is fascinating because she talks to the way that you have allowed your own power to drain away. And we've talked about how exhausting it's been to have been the way that you have been for so long. It's been exhausting to have the Tower coming and kicking you again and again and again and again. And, it's very easy to develop a victim mindset when that's happening. Raise your hand if you've been personally victimised by the Tower for your entire life, right? Mm-hmm. This is probably a good point to bring in the Ten of Wands. Because the issue, again, if you flip the situation around and consider life to be something that has happened for you rather than something that's happened to you, the way that you have done things up until now, it's kind of the hard way around. The constant fighting, the constant crossbows, 24/7. And when I look at the Ten of Wands, it represents an end. It's glorious for that. But it represents an end because there's an acknowledgement that the way that we have been doing things is the difficult way around. I mean, look at that card. Who the fuck carries sticks like that? Behave. And the same questions come up again and again and again when I look at that card. Did you fucking need 10 wands? Really? Did you need them all now? Or could you have stashed some under a bush? Could you have stashed the lot under a bush, walked home, got a friend, had a cup of tea, and pulled yourself around, and then gone back and got them? The way that you have done things has been often the hard way around, and maybe some of that's been related to the way that you've communicated with people. Maybe that's the way that you've felt overwhelmed a lot of the time. Aries like things to be moving, and you like to be starting things, right? You like to be getting things off the ground. But I think a lot more people are starting to recognise in 2023 that there are aspects of their life that have been overwhelming for a long time, and it takes nothing away from them to recognise that. In fact, it's giving them the tools to start pulling these things apart and going, well, actually, I've been trying to do something this way forever and it doesn't work. Like, the best example I can come up with off the top of my head is ADHD. I'm not saying all Aries have ADHD, right? But it's a really good example to use, because a lot of people just think that they fucking suck at stuff and they have no idea why. Like for me, my time management is fucking dreadful. It really is. And I thought that was just me. I thought for some reason I was just magically worse at it than everybody else, right? But the ADHD makes sense now, because my brain slides around. And this constant and never ceasing list of priorities in my head, where I've got the top 10 things are always jostling for position. Right, I do this thing, but it's like, I should be doing this thing over here. I should sit down to do this, but oh my God, I accidentally stared at a wall for an hour and now I've lost my window to do that thing. You know, it makes much more sense when you start to see it in light of that. So now recognizing it for what it is, I can put in coping strategies to offset the worst of the slidey brain. So, you know, some of you know, I've got this fucking timer here that I use. No, it's a stupid thing, but I saw it on an advert on Instagram and I went, oh, no, my brain would love that. And I allow myself 15 minutes of zoning out, because I need a bit of zoning out time. And when that buzzer goes off, my brain goes, ooh, it's time to work now. Awesome. Increased my productivity no end, just with the sound of a buzzer. Funny thing is, I've got a little kitchen timer. It's a little piggy. And my Pisces daughter, who is autistic, yeah, I'm not going to say really quite autistic, because autism is a spectrum, right? And nobody is more or less autistic than anybody else. If you're on the spectrum, it's a binary thing, right? You're on it or you're not on it. It just depends what part of the spectrum you occupy. I have a little piggy timer, and my daughter has found that she can actually begin to cook herself food now if the timer's going off, because it clicks as it goes around, right? It gives her a sense of urgency that keeps her focused enough that she can actually cook food for herself. It's been a complete revelation. We're not talking about berating yourself or any of these kind of things. I mean, look, this whole reading's bookended by the Hermit. It's about understanding where you have issues and going, now how can I help myself help myself? Right? Rather than feeling shit about this or feeling sensitive about it if somebody else brings it up, it's like, how can I actually come up with solutions now? How can I get to a point where I stop making my life hard because I'm trying to do it the same way that I have done before? Or I'm trying to do it the same way that everybody else does it, and maybe that doesn't work for me. Because the Sun card is sitting behind it. Not only is that a card of extreme positivity and joy, it's an incredible card, it's a card of consciousness. The way that your consciousness seems to be focusing, Aries, is very fucking interesting to me. Four of Wands, creating a new foundation. There you are, Queen of Wands. Right underneath there. You know, this Queen of Wands being in reverse isn't a fucking problem. It's a fucking gift, as far as I can see, for you in June. Because it's recognizing where things haven't been working for you. Right? Where you have not been able to show up in your, you know, with your best foot forwards, for whatever reason, whether it's some sort of, you know, deep-seated emotional trauma, some deep-seated emotional pain, and that's going to be true for a lot of people, or whether it's something like just your time management. You know, do you need a little beepy thing to help you focus? Do you need to decompress more often than you have been doing? You know, fire signs, I think, well, Leo and Aries, I think probably a little less Sagittarius, to be honest, right? We've got that habit of just kind of getting obsessive about doing, right? Doing a thing. And we forget to take a step back every now and again and just go, do you know what? My entire life does not need to be occupied by this thing. I'm just breathe now, you know? I'll come back to it later. Sagittarius just get distracted. Not always, actually. They can hyper-focus really quite well, but they will wander off quite often. You know, whichever way that it works for you. I mean, this month seems to me to be really fucking powerful. Not necessarily because anything is happening, but because you are making the decision not to allow this to rule your life anymore. And it's a big decision, right? This big decision is kind of sitting up there in the ether, right? This is a spiritual proposition here, right? I am not going to allow myself to be ruled by this anymore. And then from there, it's about how in the day-to-day you create the circumstances by which you've got the redundancy built in, where you can do things differently, right? Bit of flexibility, a bit of give everywhere. And we have the High Priestess and the Hermit. I mean, these two cards, very internal cards. Yeah, we're moving into Gemini season. Well, I think we've just hit it, actually, where, you know, everybody's a little bit more sociable. Everybody's a little bit more chatty. A little less committed about stuff, right? Everybody's taking things a little bit easier, and it's all about communication rather than necessarily doing anything. But I feel like in some ways you're allowing yourself to be a little bit quieter. I think this month is all about listening for you. I mean, these are two extremely passive cards in terms of outward stuff. The Hanged Man is more passive than the pair of them, but they're really quite close. You know, cards maybe it's 2 and 3 in the list of most passive. The High Priestess is about being still. It's about inner wisdom for sure. It's about intuition. It's about allowing yourself to be a conduit. And I really do feel like it's about sitting in a state of observation. Now, whether this is observing other people, and that's probably true because everybody else is going to be, you know, riding the Gemini wave and going to be very chatty and talking a lot about stuff, which could give you incredible insight. It's also about listening to yourself. You know, there's something almost a bit withdrawn about your energy, except I don't feel like it's withdrawn. I feel like it's you resting and observing. You're saying, what new things can I pick up from the people around me, from what's going on around me at any given point? And then the Hermit is like, how do I process this? How do I apply it to myself? How do I become the embodiment of this principle that I will not allow myself to be ruled by this anymore? You know? And the creativity that I was talking about before seems to be in the resolution of these issues that you have had, that you now acknowledge, that you now recognize, and how you can start showing up more like this than like this. It's an incredibly powerful month, Aries, and I don't think that you need to worry if you're not feeling, you know, particularly gregarious, or even if you are and you're getting out there and you're finding you haven't got very much to say, because this month is about listening to you internally, listening to people externally, and finding a way to kind of marry up the two, and then taking a kind of big problem solving broom to your existence and being like, how do I make this better? It's not about hitting neutrality, it's about going up from here, Aries. And I love this for you. I really love it for you. So, I'm going to go over to Vimeo now. I've been chatting away for ages, I'm really sorry. Fucking hell. If you would like to join me over there, you're very, very welcome. First link in the description box, you know what to do. Other than that, it's a really good month, Aries. It's a really good month. And I don't know if anybody's told you today, but I am so fucking proud of you. Like, it's been hard what you've been through, but it's becoming so worth the effort, and it only gets better from here, because it's all about mindset, you know? Right, gonna leave it there. Know that I love you all very, very much. I'll see you soon.